All right, it's the Week in the Review. I'm Dave Morris here in the Oklahoman's video studio. We will go through some of the big stories, and there were a lot of big stories in the Oklahoma City market from the past week. Looking ahead to some of the headlines that will be coming up this weekend and beyond. I mean, last Saturday night we were watching the Thunder lose an epic game to the Warriors. And it seems like in the time since last night, we saw the Thunder lose an epic game to the Warriors. In between, however, Spotlight won Best Picture at the Oscars. We had Super Tuesday on Tuesday as Oklahoma participated in the political scene. Aubrey McClendon indicted on the federal level. Then on Wednesday, Aubrey McClendon dies in a fiery car crash. On Thursday, another Republican debate, and the feds say they're going to withdraw the indictment against McClendon. And then again, a Thunder game last night in the Warriors. Here to help us decipher all the stuff that happened from the past week, we have Chris Castile on the phone, perhaps via Skype from Washington, D.C. Chris, how are you?
I'm doing well, Dave. Thanks.
And here on the business side of things, Don Mecoy, Paul Monies, and Adam Wilmoth. Everybody, thank you so much for your time this morning. We appreciate it. Perhaps, Chris, I'll start with you. I know you have dress rehearsal to get to. There's a lot of busy things happening in Washington, D.C. today. But looking back at Super
Tuesday, that, Dave, you're just going to leave that?
I'm just going to leave that hanging there, right there.
Okay, that's fine with me too.
Unless we can see photos of you in the golf pants.
Okay. All right.
He's like, fair enough. All right. Looking back, what did we learn from Super Tuesday, the Oklahoma version?
So we learned again that Oklahoma voters can be have minds of their own. We had all the polls before leading up to Tuesday's vote showed Trump ahead and Cruz won, and he was one of two states he won on Tuesday, and Bernie Sanders won on the Democratic side. And there's all kinds of kind of signals leading up to Tuesday that Bernie Sanders was going to do well in Oklahoma. A big signal was that the undecided in the polling leading up to Tuesday's voting was always so high, and Hillary Clinton is so well known. So you kind of figure a person that well known, and then you've got this. I was about to say new face, but. Not exactly a new face in Bernie Sanders, but at least somebody that was charging up people. Seemed to have a lot of momentum. It was somebody new to vote for, at least, and a lot of the undecided broke his way. I think over 55% broke his way, and he wound up winning in a blowout. So, but the delegates that were at stake on both sides were apportioned proportionately. It wasn't winner take all. Sanders didn't win, all 41 Democratic delegates on, at stake, and Cruz didn't win the 43 Republican ones. So basically, they were split pretty evenly among all of the candidates in there. And what happens now, at least, there's all this talk about how many delegates it takes to secure the nomination. Will Trump get them in time, before the convention in Cleveland this summer, and what happens if you don't? Well, so just kind of at the next step of all this, the delegates that were apportioned based on the results on Tuesday become people pretty soon.
And where do these people go? You mentioned the convention. Where is it at this summer?
Well, first you have to do it at each state level. You do it at state party conventions. So in Oklahoma City, probably the Republican convention and state Democratic convention will be held in Oklahoma City over the next few weeks, probably. And people will run for these spots within their state party because they are trying to go to Cleveland or Philadelphia in the Democratic
Gotcha.
to represent the candidate that they support. So you'll have a slate of candidates that want to go to Cleveland representing Donald Trump. He won 15 delegates. 13 delegates. He'll have 13 people run to represent Donald Trump in Cleveland. So all the hypothesis, all the theorizing about whether you get to Cleveland and if nobody's got the majority, how do you get these delegates? Well, I don't see these 13 delegates from Oklahoma, breaking for Marco Rubio or any of these, or Mitt Romney, or any of these names that get thrown out. They might go Cruz. Some of them probably would go Cruz, but it's hard to see how any of those scenarios play out. People are adamant about their case. It's always hard. Even I remember in 2008, when Hillary Clinton won Oklahoma, as much as the delegates from Oklahoma, liked Obama and were ready to ride, it was difficult for them to finally, just say, okay, we're Obama now. We're going to give our votes to Obama. We're giving up on Hillary. And we talked about in 2012 the people that represented Ron Paul at the convention in Tampa. Some of them I don't think ever did vote for Mitt Romney. So it would be so chaotic. As to be, I just think it's unfeasible, really, in this day and age, to go to a convention and try to convince people who are for one candidate to switch their vote to somebody who's really a lot different, especially one that, like Rubio, who's having such a bitter and gross, inappropriate feud with Trump right now.
It led off last night's debate. The debate was in Detroit from the Republican side of things. Only 4 candidates left in that debate. And right off the top, they got into that. And at one point, Rubio and Trump really were trying to talk over each other. And of course, at that point, neither side is saying a whole lot. It's just the unintelligible yelling, I believe, is the closed caption we've seen before on that.
A lot of older people, in trying to give some context to the whole Trump candidacy, talk about Reagan in the Ronald Reagan in the late 70s, and the fear the party had about him, because he had done really well in 1976, almost won the nomination against Gerald Ford in 76. But there was this, whole quote establishment wing of the party that thought he was kind of a kook and, an actor, not qualified to be. What are we going to do? Well, and I see some of those comparisons. There always is going to be, the establishment, there's always somebody that's going to make them uncomfortable for some reason. But there is an absolutely huge difference between Donald Trump and Ronald Reagan, besides the fact that Ronald Reagan was a 2-term governor from California, which is something big. He wasn't vulgar. He didn't speak like this. He didn't speak like Donald Trump. He wasn't so crude. I mean, to me, you really ultimately can't compare somebody who was a gentleman to Donald Trump.
I'm not sure you can compare a whole lot of people to Donald Trump. Chris, stand by. Again, Super Tuesday on Tuesday earlier this week, and then we had the debate last night. Fellas, I'll turn to you guys at this point because on Tuesday there was an indictment handed down against Aubrey McClendon. Don, what was that about?
Well, the Justice Department has been investigating allegations of antitrust violations in the acquisition of acreage, land, leases, wells, and the indictment came down. It was referring to 2 unnamed companies, Company A, Company B, and they specifically named Aubrey McClendon. And it was set during a period of time when he was the CEO of Chesapeake, so it was fairly obvious that Company A was Chesapeake. But he was accused of violating of bid rigging, basically working with this other company to not bid against one another so that the bids would stay lower, and then they would sort of portion out the acreage and all the assets that they were acquiring.
Perhaps this is a silly, naive question. So if there's those 2 companies, let's say Company A and Company B, bidding for something, if there's a Company C or a Company C bidding on that as well, there's Company D bidding on that, that price would still possibly go up. But if it's just these 2 in play, they're like, hey, I've got this one or I've got that. That's what was alleged in the indictment.
Exactly.
Okay.
But now, Aubrey came out that night and forcefully denied the claims, and what he said was, this is wrong and it's unprecedented. And his statement essentially said, they don't really understand how this works. This is how this business is done. And as you point out, anything that's out there that companies are bidding on, any company can bid on it. And anyone who owns that, who has royalty interests or whatever, they can contact different companies. They can consider offers. There's no deadline. It's not like there's an auction where a hammer's going to fall. So, he was saying, this is how we acquire this kind of acreage. That was one of his ways that he seemed to be heading with his defense.
Then on Wednesday morning, we get the report from the police department and the fire department. There was a single car crash happened a little after 9 a.m. up on Midwest Boulevard, a bridge, a single car fatality. And Don, as the word and the news leaked out later that day, it involved Aubrey McClendon. From the news side of things, you as the business editor, What are you thinking? Walk us through the process of how you guys start to cover a story like this.
Well, I mean, for me, as it was for most people in Oklahoma City, it's a real gut punch when you first hear it. You're in disbelief. But we sent people to the police department, and we had heard that it was Aubrey, and so I immediately sat down and started writing just off the top of my head. We've covered Aubrey very intensely for a very long time, and was trying to get something ready if that was in fact Aubrey, so that we would have something that we could immediately post online. So, the rest of the day is kind of a blur after that, but I think for me, like for a lot of people, it was just shocking to hear.
Adam, you were over at the cop shop. I caught up with you over there. What did you guys do when the story breaks? How do you cover stuff like this?
Well, you're right. I went over to the police station and was part of that, listened to that press conference and heard the news as it came across. And our immediate process was get the immediate news online, get the story told, and then we went back and spent the rest of the day talking to the companies to people who have worked with him, worked for him, the nonprofits that have benefited from his givings through the years, and just talked to as many people as we could. And just the outpouring was pretty amazing. That a lot of people, we talked to a lot of people, but there are a lot more who sent in statements, sent in comments. We heard from people throughout the state, throughout the industry, and just pretty amazing outpouring there.
You had covered Aubrey for a long time. Chris, I'll pull you back in if you're still with us via Skype from Washington, D.C. Same thing. You were talking with people from that side of the country, their perspectives of Aubrey, right?
Yeah, I mean, there were, in fact, one of them was former U.S. Senator Don Nichols, who served on the board of Chesapeake. But I think the reaction among the Oklahomans up here was myself included, was just total shock.
But in fact, you and I, Chris, were miking up at that point, about to do a debrief on Super Tuesday when we got the news and the police press conference was about to happen. We were both in shock as well.
It's hard to kind of talk about this, because we haven't really established exactly what happened in there's not some factual thing to say about what happened in those last few seconds before he crashed and died. So, really, I should just, I don't know. I mean, I talked to him a few times, and I really learned a lot. Every time I talked to him, I learned a lot. That's all I can say. And he was so, respected up here. The only times that I really dealt with him was when he would come up here for, he was kind of behind this natural gas transportation sector effort that T. Boone Pickens and some of the other lawmakers were pushing for. What it just never got off the ground, as no pun intended, but it's just never well received. But like I said, in the times that I was able to interview him, I thought it was really interesting. He and I graduated from high school in Oklahoma City the same year. I'm from John Marshall. I think he was Heritage Hall. And we played the Did You Know game and everything. But it's just I was just really impressed with how much he had accomplished. And I didn't even get to know him at all until really the fracking boom, the natural gas boom had started. And what gas, Adam and Paul and Don would know this better, but the gas went from $12, $13 per million cubic feet to $2. And people will know. Most people will never know who he is, and they'll never know the impact he had on their lives because of that.
Well, he had an impact, fellas. I'll bring you guys back in on this. He had an impact not only on the Oklahoma community, but a global market impact by the way he changed the way he changed the energy industry, right?
Yeah.
Well, a lot of the reason that the price did what it did was because of his drive to get that stuff out of the ground. And other companies followed his lead. Eventually, everybody followed his lead, and there was so much gas being produced that the price collapsed.
Paul, then on Wednesday or Thursday, yesterday, the indictment not going to happen now. What's new on that deal?
That's right. Yeah, the Justice Department filed a motion Thursday afternoon, basically saying that they were going to dismiss the indictment, or seeking to dismiss his indictment against Aubrey McClendon because he had died. And so at the same time, though, they said that the rest of their antitrust investigation into oil and natural gas leasing industry is ongoing. And so they're still kind of got a part of that's ongoing. And we have previously reported last year that separately from before the Aubrey indictment came out, Sandridge Energy had received a subpoena from the U.S. Department of Justice looking into some of these antitrust issues in Oklahoma. The company really hasn't commented much beyond that. They've done regulatory filings, but there's that investigation is still ongoing. The Aubrey indictment that came out on Tuesday names unindicted co-conspirators. We obviously know that Company A is Chesapeake. They said that they are in the Department of Justice leniency program. They they've cooperated pretty fully with the investigation so far, and they're not expecting any kind of criminal charges from that investigation.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, does the indictment at this point target anyone? It had targeted Aubrey initially, but now?
Yeah, it's still, we won't know for sure until, see what the judge does and what the Department of Justice does on the next step on this, but there were other people that were unnamed mentioned in that indictment, and it's kind of too early to say exactly what could come of it, but they're still investigating that whole issue.
After co-founding and being the CEO of Chesapeake, Aubrey went over and started another company. Didn't take long, American Energy Partners. What's the latest with that company?
Well, they issued a statement yesterday. They are the leadership team there over at American Energy Partners is they're persevering with Aubrey's vision and his design of the company. But obviously, it's gonna take a little adjustment for them. Aubrey was someone who was very much hands-on, very much involved in pretty much every venture he's been a part of, and so you can imagine that it would take a while for at the company where he is the sitting CEO for the rest of the team to pick that up and to move the company forward. But they did thank the community. They thanked Aubrey and his family for what they've done for the company, and they said that they're going to persevere with what he started.
I was reading last night a column story that the New York Times had about Aubrey McClendon, and they certainly looked a lot at our content from the Oklahoman, of the people that we had interviewed and those stories. He had kind of expanded his scope to an international basis, hadn't he?
Yeah, but I think one of the things that's interesting as I'm listening to this discussion is, he was an Oklahoma City kid. He graduated from Heritage Hall. He worked here. He founded these companies here. He had tremendous influence here. And as we're talking about him here, I didn't personally know him, but we're all calling him Aubrey.
It's a first. There are very few people in Oklahoma City that you call by a first name that you know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah. So he was really intertwined with Oklahoma City. There was a period of time when a lot of companies picked up stakes that had been here and they moved to Houston because Houston was where the energy business was based. That was never even a question with Chesapeake. Chesapeake was never going to move. In fact, it just got bigger and bigger and bigger, and it became just a huge. They have a huge campus. They had thousands of local employees, and they were just involved in everything. As was Aubrey, who I continue to call Aubrey, even though I'm not a friend of Aubrey.
Mr. McClendon.
Yeah. So I just think that's a big part of the story for us, and that's a lot of what we were trying to do that very first day, was to tell the Oklahoma City story, which I think was the right thing to do.
Well, as Chris Castile mentioned, and Chris has had to bail, and let me back up a little bit. When I mentioned the golf pants, it's actually a gridiron, which is a political journalism type thing. It's not like he's going out to, not like he has a tee time he has to get to. So
as far as we know.
Well said. Guys, thanks so much for your time this morning. I appreciate it. I know it was a busy week for everybody. It was going to be an election-filled week. Took a different turn. So much appreciated. Great job off the business desk all week long. And again, more coverage coming up this weekend. Big thanks to Chris Castile for his help from the Washington, D.C. side as well. Have a great week, everyone.